What if the biggest barrier to your leadership potential is you? I feel like more and more leaders are being demanded more time, or more energy, more effort, more results. And a lot of us, a lot of you are burning out, self-sacrificing, and silently struggling. Here's the truth. You can't lead others until you lead yourself well. I think that when we say you're a leader, people think you have to have this title, but really, everyone's a leader. Everyone's leading something, right, in their life. But what would it look like if instead of running on empty, you showed up fueled, resilient, and grounded? Today, we're going to dive into why leading yourself first isn't just important, but it's the foundation for everything. Today, I'm honored to welcome Elizabeth Sherman. She's a master certified life and health coach with over 18 years of experience in helping women in midlife prioritize their well-being. Elizabeth's journey into health coaching began with a personal mission to prevent the challenges her mother faced with breast cancer. And today, she empowers women to take charge of their health before it's too late. Elizabeth is a game changer, challenging us to break boundaries around leadership by teaching us that true impact starts with self-leadership. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me, Stacey. I'm so super excited to have this conversation with you and the listeners today. It's going to be amazing.
Me too. I read your notes and I was like, oh, this is going to be so juicy. So today we're going to dive into a theme that's both vital and overlooked. Beyond leading others, right? Like your first priority is you. I think for a lot of us in midlife, we feel like that's something selfish to say when we say my priority is myself and then everything comes after that. But I think that more and more people are leaning into that. I do think also that in leadership, we're taught that serving others, guiding teams, and constantly being on, whether it's responding to every message as soon as you get it or, over delivering. I think that it's kind of this culture that we've all assumed is the norm. But what if the key to truly impactful leadership was something much more personal? What if to lead others effectively, that first step is to actually lead ourselves? In this episode, we're going to explore a connection between inner well-being and the way we show up as leaders. And Elizabeth is going to be our guide, kind of talking about how we prioritize not only personal health, but physical and mental health, and not just about staying functional, but acting like if that is the foundation for the leader that we want to be. For many of us in midlife, another thing is that inner critic. And I feel like there is a very delicate balance between the inner critic and that self-sacrificial identity and that lack of care and attention with our health. And I'm going to ask you like a question I ask everyone, Elizabeth, which is along the lines of what I just kind of said. If you could rewrite one rule about success or leadership, given your background and your experiences, what would that be?
I think what it is in the United States or in Western culture, we have this belief that leadership is top down. Like as the leader, you tell other people what to do. And I think that also carries through with our health, that we tell our body what it should do. And when we can have a bottom-up leadership style where we are listening to the people who we are leading and we're boots on the ground, or in health, we're listening to our body and we aren't telling our body what to do. We're feeling into it. What should I be doing? That completely changes the game.
Yeah. And, I love what you said there about just tuning into your body and in an organizational level, tuning into your employees, your staff, right?
Exactly.
I feel like when I used to work in corporate, I worked for a government agency and we had 5 generations of employees. And within even those 5 generations of employees, there were different levels of embracing work-life balance, or some people would never call in and use their sick days, and other people would like take all of their leave. But what are your thoughts around kind of that generational, and I know you specifically work with all women, but you focus on women that are going through kind of menopause or in their 50s and 60s. But have you felt that generational kind of tension?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. 100%. And I think that there are such differences between, so I'm Gen X. Yeah. And so when women in my generation, when we think about what self-care looks like or what taking downtime means or doing for others, because as women, we are socialized to believe that we can't do for ourselves, that, you know, taking time out of our day is selfish. And something I want to talk about today is the oxygen mask analogy, which is an analogy that I abhor. We can talk about why. But that taking time out for ourselves, that we do that so that we can take care of others. And I think that the younger generation sees that I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be running on empty. I don't want to be in midlife and wondering, what is it that I want? Because many women of my generation have no idea what we want, because we've been spending the bulk of our time focusing on what everyone else wants instead of what we want.
Yeah, yeah. I never thought of it this way, but it really just struck me just now when you said, because I'm Gen X too, the latter part of Gen X. But when you said that we take time so that we can go look after others, oh my goodness, that is so true. I think even as a young mom, my kids are older now, so I've got an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, but all of the time that I took, even I had a flex schedule. I had every other Friday off. I would do like a 9-hour shift and then get every other Friday off. It was to schedule doctor's appointments and get errands done. Oh my gosh. I just had like a jaw-dropping realization there. But tell me how you think doing those things and baking it on. So I read a statistic here, and I'm not surprised, and I don't think neither are you. More than 70% of women in midlife report health concerns, chronic stress, sleep issues, the effects of burnout. And so it's clear that leadership, of course, starts with some sort of integrity with yourself and keeping sort of that promise with yourself. But how have you seen that played out with, as the degradation of like your health happens, your leadership impact and the things that you want to do, that's also degrading without you making that correlation?
Yeah. So how do we see that? Well, okay. So I think that, you know, to put this into the health perspective, I think that many of us have this all or nothing mentality. Yeah. And I hear it all the time. Like, I'll sleep when I die. Like, we have this relationship with productivity. When my clients come to me, well, so first of all, when we are talking about self-care, I like to use the analogy of self-care being those things that we do to take care of the future version of myself. So sometimes that may be going to the doctor. Sometimes it may be doing your taxes. You know, those very unglamorous adult things that we need to do in order to not screw ourselves over. Yeah. Okay. But for the most part, what tends to happen is we have all of these other obligations to be the good boss, be the good employee, be the good mother, be the good daughter, be the good friend, like, it's endless. We women have been socialized to believe that we have to be good, and that any failing on our part is going to mean that we are, you know, just a terrible person. And so we say yes to all of these things in our life. And when we say yes to all of those things in our life, they take time. Time is one of the things that none of us feel like we have enough of. Mm-hmm. And the reason that so many of us make plans to make dinner and then we come home and we're like, I just can't. Let's order in, right? Yeah. That's a common theme. Mm-hmm. The reason that we can't make dinner for ourselves is because we've allocated our time to everyone else and we don't have enough time for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so the overwhelm that we experience in doing for others then creates that thought of, well, I just can't do one more thing. Yeah. I need to veg out on the couch.
Yeah. And I think it's a matter of a reprioritization, right? So time is precious, period. Yeah. And every decision, whether it is a conscious decision or some of us like to think we're making unconscious decision and, I didn't have a choice. We always have a choice about what to do with our time, right? Like always, even if we don't make a choice, that is a choice. And so I feel like one of the ways that I'll speak for myself personally, having gone through burnout, having manifested this autoimmune thing 3 years ago and working religiously for 3 years to try to like figure out my flow, like what works for my body, where I am not on medication, I feel good, I'm sleeping well. Like it entailed really upending how I prioritized everything and going back to kind of my core values and what was important for me. And core values are going to be different for everyone, but I think one of the main ones, and some people would argue, but it's, I want to kind of be healthy. I want to have vitality. Certainly if you are a mom or you are a caretaker or you have a partner, you want to have a long sort of runway and more time with them. And so I do think that in midlife, our bodies don't bounce back the way that it did. I mean, we all have those stories where, oh my gosh, I used to come home at 5 a.m. and go to work at 8 a.m. and you were like, fine. Now it's like 7 to 10 business days recovery, right? Like from a late night out. So our bodies themselves, as we're aging, needs more time. And so I feel like there's this shift has to happen where to me, it's like an excuse where I'm too busy, but it's also like a badge of honor when you talk about that productivity demon, where we hold it up like this is my alibi for not being in the job I want or the physical health I want or in the relationships that I want, and everybody kind of being okay with that. Not switching gears, but building on that, tell me a little bit about the journey when your mom got diagnosed and sort of when you went through things with her and how that changed your prioritization and the way that you sort of show up and the way that you serve others because of that.
Yeah, that's actually the origin story of how I ended up to be where I am today. So my mom passed away in 2001 from breast cancer, and seeing her in the hospital, I could connect the dots to where I was as a 33-year-old woman. And she was 65 at the time, 63, 65, I can't remember. And I could see that if I didn't make some changes in my life,
that
I was witnessing my future.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, at the time, I thought that all I needed to do was get my body healthy. What I've come to realize since is that through being a life coach and working through my own mental and emotional health, is that the mental and emotional health, like how we think about our problems, how we think about the world around us, is just as important and influences our physical health. And so like for years, I would do all of the diet things. I would do the exercises. I would be on the diets, and it was frustrating because my body wasn't how I thought it should be.
Yeah.
And once I started changing my mindset, once I started changing how I thought about myself, there's one concept that I talk about, which is fault versus responsibility. And so I would make these excuses, like you said earlier, like, oh, well, it's not my fault my body is like this.
Yeah.
But I realized that this was my only body. And so therefore it was my responsibility to do whatever I could in order to make it as healthy as possible. Now, there's no guarantee that I'm never going to get breast cancer like my mom.
Yeah.
However, in treating my body well, I know that if I do get it, I'm positioning myself as being able to fight the disease as best as I can. And that has really been the work that I do with my clients, is having it be a health first approach versus many women. We want the aesthetic, we want the weight loss, we want to look a certain way. That's how I started out. But when we can do those things that we know are good for our body, then it's going to pay off in a myriad of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I have to say that when I was pregnant with my son, Adam, I got gestational diabetes. And ever since that, when I had to test my blood sugar 5 times a day, get up at 11 p.m. and have like a half a slice of whole wheat bread with peanut butter. I still can't stand peanut butter since that whole episode. But your point about almost future casting, you in your 30s, watching your mom go through, that tragedy, and understanding that if you didn't make drastic changes, that was going to potentially be your future, having that oracle moment. For me, it was the gestational diabetes, where I understood that our in my family, that propensity was huge. Like a lot of my elders had it. And so for me, the choices became, even when it resolved itself after he was born, making different choices. I want to cue in on something you said. I attended this a women's empowerment conference a couple of years ago. And there were about 4,000 women there. And we did this exercise called Stand Up for Your Sister. And really it was, Elizabeth, just like a couple of questions. And the host, we filled out the form, and it was some tough questions. Like, I hate my body, all of the awful things. And we checked it off, and then we folded it up and passed it around the stadium. And so I don't know who ended up in my paper. I don't know whose paper I ended up with, but we all sat down and she read each question. And if you had a check mark on the form for that question, you stood up for your sister. And it was just designed to show people that were women that were very much similar in a lot of the challenges that we had. The one question, and mind you, this is years ago, and it just, oh my God, it punched me like in the gut when one of the questions was, I hate my body. And everyone stood up, everyone. And we all had this sobering moment, every single person in that 4,000 plus of us. And she asked the hostess, she literally sat down and she said, okay, how old is the youngest person in this group? Like in this. And so everybody was like 13. And the youngest was 11 years old. And then she said, who was the oldest person in the room? And I think it was like 84. Like her granddaughters had brought her to the event. So you're talking 11 years through 84, 4,000 women, which is a pretty healthy demographic, right? A subset of females, the female population, all despising their bodies. And it was just such wasted, like it was such a humbling moment. to know that you could start at 11 and in your 80s, you're still like grappling with body issues and not the body that you want. But tell me about, and I know you were talking about the diet culture and kind of you starting there and wanting this aesthetic, but how do you see that playing out with results when you focus in on mindset and less so just results from calorie counting or whatever? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me answer a question that you didn't ask first.
Okay.
Which is, so we have women between the ages 11 and 84.
Yeah.
Who all not only hate their body, but are spending time thinking about how much they hate their body.
Yes.
And I just want to offer that, think about, for everyone who's listening right now, think about how much wasted time and energy you have in thinking about your body, thinking about it's too fat or it's too short or it's too, your hips are too big or whatever, your breasts are too small. Like, that is wasted time and energy. And if you are leading people, they don't care.
Yeah.
And you could be using all of that time to be more effective in your role as a leader. And so I think that, to answer your question now, and I don't believe that we ever want to get to body love. I mean, maybe some of us do, but for most women listening right now, the thought of I love my body just feels so foreign.
Yes.
And just not something that I could ever get to. And so I want to suggest that, and also, we don't tell men that they should love their bodies, right? We just don't. And so for women to aspire to body love just doesn't resonate with many. But we can get to a place of body neutrality. And what that means is being able to accept my body where it is. And being as a woman in midlife, it's so fascinating because as a younger woman, I was thinking about my body in terms of weight. But now that I'm 56 years old almost next week, then I start like thinking about my gray hair and my wrinkles and like my skin changing and how my hair is like changing and thinning. And so it becomes more of, if we can do this work and really get to a place where we can think about our body as being a natural like ebb and flow. And I don't know if that's the right phrase, but like when we can get to a place where we don't hate our body anymore, we can really start to develop like who we are as a person. Because for everyone who's listening right now, the people who are in your life, they love you for what you do rather than your appearance. They love you for how you laugh and how you hug them and all of those great things. And your health then will support that.
I really, really appreciate that perspective on body neutrality. I don't think I've quite heard it in this context before, because what I typically hear, whether it's on social media or other talk shows or anything like that, is body positivity. And so even if it isn't the right term, that's the term that people are putting forth, body positivity. But this concept of neutrality is really beautiful because one of the things I teach when I coach is suspending judgment and doing it in a way that appreciates and respects the other humans' thoughts, feelings, assumptions, all of the things they're bringing into the conversation or the equation. And I think even with ourselves, I wrote this blog post a couple months ago, and so I did some research on it. It was about ageism. And the most startling thing I realized as you were talking, even it came up for me, with the gray hairs and all of these things, right? And I don't know a woman listening. If you are, well, God bless you, but who doesn't have this one little straight chin hair that's just like, what in the heck, right? Like, I was on the plane this weekend coming back from DC and my hand happened to and I was like, oh my God, this one, right? So if you don't have this chin hair, then I don't even know what you're doing on this podcast. But definitely we have these things that pop up for us. And I love this idea of maintaining neutrality with our bodies and having that grace. And the word I love to use now with myself and my daughter, who's 18, is integrity, like having integrity with myself. This is the only body we're going to have. And personally, you know, I had a lot of challenges with endometriosis and all those things. So I've got so many scars on my stomach and so forth from all of these surgeries that it's a running joke in our house with it. But having neutrality and acceptance and love just for that part of me that did in fact carry these two children I love so much. And you know, I also suffered a lot of miscarriages. So I know both sides of that equation too. Coming to terms with just the state of that part of me was so powerful, because it does hold you back, even when nobody is actually seeing that part of you. And I don't know what it is for someone else, but the other thing I really love that you said was, and maybe it's something that you could elaborate on, is, you know, what are some strategies where, okay, maybe self-love is too much of a stretch for you right now, right? How can we get maybe 2 or 3 tips to get closer to that neutrality where lifting that heaviness and attention and energy off of this thing that you may or may not be able to control, depending on your underlying health situation, but can free up your energy, vibes, your aura, really, to attract different things into your life, even as a leader. But how can we get closer to that neutrality?
Yeah, good question. So there are a couple things that I want to say. One is that we as women have been socialized to be dissatisfied with our bodies. And that is done through diet culture. Women are taught that the most important thing about us is our appearance. And that if we're lucky, someday we will attract a successful man. On the other side, men are taught that in order to be successful, that they have to, well, that the best thing about them is to be successful. And if they do a good job with that, they will find an attractive woman. So be aware that if you are thinking about your body, I don't want to say it's not your fault, but it's not your fault. Like, right. Even if you had progressive parents, like, this is how society trains us to think about ourselves. And so, there are 2 concepts. One is that I think it's important to understand that our brains, we think that they're telling us the truth, like it's telling us the weather, that my body is disgusting, just like it's sunny and 75 degrees out right now. And we have to start calling BS on that. Like, what if that's not a fact? What if there is just one person in this world who does not see our body as being disgusting? Well, then it's not a fact if everyone doesn't agree on it.
Yeah.
And so the second piece is we are allowed to change our beliefs and thoughts about our bodies and about everything in the world. I'm sure we've all had that experience where, you know, we go into a job and we're like, this is the best job ever. And then, like, I don't know, some point down the line, we're like...
Sometimes even the next day.
Exactly. The job hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But our thoughts about the job have changed. So we know that we can change our thoughts about anything. And some of you may have had that experience where you, at one point, you didn't feel so bad about your body, but now you're starting to feel bad about it. Well, so there's nothing to say that you can't go backwards, but it takes intention and it takes talking back to your body. So one of the things that I do is I notice that even though I work with my clients in the area of body image, that when I get out of the shower and I see myself in the mirror, I'm like, oh, Elizabeth, that's not so great. Like we have these negative thoughts that are what I call ghost thoughts. They've been so practiced for so many years in our life that it just comes up. Another one might be, oh, you need to go on a diet, right? We've been conditioned with that. But I have started talking back to myself, and I've started asking myself, who decided that? Like, who decided what a 56-year-old body should look like? Who decided what a mom of 2 kids with endometriosis?
And oh, by the way, it's supposed to look like we did at 18.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, not only that, but we should, one of my big catchphrases recently is, we think that we should be able to eat like a 13-year-old boy and look like a Victoria's Secret model. Right?
Right.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I want to say, so 2 things that have helped me and my clients. So there's this concept called a safe problem. And everyone arguably in the world has a safe problem. And a safe problem contextually is something that you go back to time and again that gets you out of making big decisions, that feel scary, and that will challenge your norm, your status quo. And for the majority of women, it has been weight or body image. And this safe problem keeps you from a couple of things. One, you're not going to kind of go after that job because you don't look the way that you feel they would do it. You may, if you have your own business and you got to be in front of social media and you've got to get on camera and you're just shying away from that, you're like, okay, when I lose the weight, I'm going to do it. So that is your safe problem. And sometimes the safe problem, even if you've solved it, comes back again. Maybe you gain back the 5, 10 pounds or the 20 pounds that you worked so hard last year to lose, because now that's a problem that you can handle, right? So I would argue that a lot of us have a safe problem. And to everyone listening, we're not using weight to sort of pick on anyone. It sort of is just a very prevalent body image, kind of body safety, body neutrality discussion. But it's an easy one that everybody kind of talks about. But for me, once I identified that the safe problem for me was in fact 15, 20 pounds, and that I had actually lost hundreds of pounds in the last 40 years, right? I know how to lose weight. I've done it before, gotten to my quote unquote goal weight and come back and all of those things. And yet it's kept popping up because guess what? It stopped me from going after bigger things. And so I would say that if you are a leader or anybody, right? But we're talking specifically about leadership, and you have a safe problem that gets you out of risk. Maybe you're risk adverse and you don't want to go after the thing. Some of these things really sabotage you without you actually ever knowing. And I believe there's a lot of us that are in situations and circumstances that we can change, but because that change seems so huge and threatening some part of that security that we're complacent in, that it's easier to stay with this, stay in the situation that you're in, and then make the big change. And so I want to kind of challenge our listeners to really think thoughtfully about some of the tips and strategies Elizabeth shared and some that I tossed in. These concepts of body neutrality, this concept of having integrity with yourself, this concept of not using, kind of, I don't want to say weight, but your physical wellness and neglecting that part of you as imperative in leading and in being successful. The two coexist. They're not separate entities. And one of the things that for me, the busier I got and the more successful I got, the more my health actually suffered, which is so weird. But have you seen that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Because like the busier you get, the more stress you have, the more time, the less time you have to spend on your health.
Yeah.
For sure. 100%.
But it's like a badge of honor too.
Yeah.
It's like now you even have a bigger reason not to like take care of those underlying things, right? Mm-hmm. Any last words of advice for anyone listening to this? And, in particular for me, having a daughter that is 18, knowing that she has seen me go through different iterations of my wellness journey. And for me, it especially in the last couple of years, it's become a lot less so about the number on the scale. And for me, my metric is my blood work. Mm-hmm. Like when I do my, and I go for blood work every 3 months or six months, because we're just working on some things. Those are my metrics. And it has changed the game for me because now it's that's an incentive for me to try different things, whether it's different foods or different activities, different lifestyle choices. It really has made the difference for me not focusing on a number. And I'm a better leader, right? I make better choices. I'm clear-headed. I'm sleeping. But what would you say, especially to, let's talk 5 generations, right? It's not outside the realm of possibility that 5 generations are listening to this. What would you say to them is kind of the number one thing that they can start with to get closer to body neutrality?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that it's important to acknowledge that health, body image, like it's all this self-referential cycle. So like the better you eat, the more you exercise, the better you sleep, the more you manage your health, probably the better you're going to think about your body. And the better you think about your body and yourself as a person, the better you will treat yourself.
Oh, I love that.
You will eat better. You will start exercising. You will prioritize your sleep and you will manage your stress. And so I think that it's really important to understand that these things that we talk about they're all interdependent and they all strengthen each other.
I love that.
That being said, I think that it's also important that if you do look at the future version of yourself and you do look at yourself at age 65 or 85 or whatever, I think I love the Stephen Covey idea of begin with the end in mind. And so if I think about my funeral, do I want to be spending all of this time thinking about my body? And so if you don't, I would recommend that you start working on that now, because it's not magically going to clear itself up at some point in time when you think you should.
Yeah.
The other aside to that is we believe that getting to our goal weight, that those thoughts will magically disappear. And they don't.
Yeah.
Your brain will come up with some other thing that it doesn't like. It'll allow you to be happy for a whole 5 minutes, and then it'll be yeah, I still don't like my body. We still have more to lose.
Yeah.
And so the only way that we can get to that point is through getting to an area where we accept our body. And let me just say one thing about that is when many of my clients hear that we want to get to a point where we accept our body, we think that means complacency. And it doesn't. You can be accepting with your job, with your marriage, and still want to make it better.
Yeah.
You can be accepting of your body and still want to be stronger, still want to be healthier. But as far as body neutrality goes, I love taking just little steps towards that. Like if you're having a good day and you think, you know what, I look pretty good today. What I want you to do is write that shit down.
Right.
It'll be more believable because you yourself thought it, 3 days ago.
Yeah. Another strategy that could potentially work is tying your wellness to a higher purpose. And for me, I visualized, who I wanted to be in my 60s and 70s. I'm in my 40s. And for me, the image sprang up as clear as I love to travel, right? Like that is a passion of mine. And I want to be able to do that effortlessly in 15, 20 years. And I also want to do it with potentially my adult kids, and if they have children, their children and their partners. And I had to make choices that would support that future desire, right? Like the ability to walk around in Italy for 10 hours and not feel exhausted or like I was going to die like immediately. The other strategy, when you talk about micro shifts, is set yourself up for success in the sense of, I live my life in 90-day increments. And so every 90 days, I get some white sticky paper and I stick it on the wall. If you come into my office, it just looks like it's wallpapered with stuff. But what I do is I write what kind of my 3 big goals are for my health, my wealth, and sort of myself and my family. That is inclusive of that. But for my health in particular, I write 3 things that I'm going to do every day, and it's tiny things. It's not like, oh my God, climb Mount Kilimanjaro. It really is, okay, walk for 10 minutes or whatever. But I claim those 3 things as, these are things, regardless of what's happening, Cat 5 hurricane, it doesn't matter. I'm doing these 3 things. It could be as small as drinking enough water. And then I write also 3 readily available resources that I have at my fingertips. Because a lot of times we're like, oh, I need to do XYZ, but I got to get to the gym. And then what if it rains? And so you're opting out. Whereas if you have the 3 strategies, okay, I'll keep it simple. I want to drink water, enough water, right? That's the goal. The resources I have at my disposal is, okay, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to keep a bottle of water on my nightstand. I'm going to keep a bottle of water in my car. I'm going to keep a bottle of water. I have one right here, but I'm going to keep one in my office or a jug of water. So it's right at my fingertips. And you could go a step further. Another resource you have is your phone. Your freaking phone is attached to you. You could put a reminder in there every hour. I'm going to take 5 sips of water. And then another thing is, a lot of us love and crave connection. We crave some sort of community. And so maybe in addition to that is, I'm going to get a buddy, right? Like I'm going to have an accountability buddy for these 3 minute goals that I have. And every Friday, we're just going to check in about how we do. So what I think what both Elizabeth and I are saying, we're trying to give listeners strategies, but also none of this has to be monumental. Like these can be really simple strategies that can literally, over the course of a year, really change the quality of not only your life, but the way you show up in the world and things you're equipped to do. Because a lot of us talk about wanting to be millionaires and successful and build our empire. Let me tell you, have you seen Taylor Swift doing shows back to back? How fit and healthy and how much she takes care of her body. You can't perform at a pace required to build that kind of wealth if you get up in the morning and your body's creaking. And so until you are equipped for that level of success, it's going to be sort of an uphill battle. Elizabeth, I want to thank you so much for hopping on our podcast and sharing so much with us. I really, really appreciate your time. And, these are my takeaways. I always take like little notes. one, of course, the like body neutrality thing for me is huge. I love that. I'm going to go home and like research that some more. But I love that you brought into this concept and this conversation, true leadership, starting with self-care, true your story about you and, your mom passing from breast cancer, kind of learning and recognizing that that could be you 30 years fast forward, and sharing with us some of the things you took so that that wasn't your necessarily the path that you were on also. And I love the conversation we had about that inner critic and really trying to create micro strategies around changing the narrative and changing the mindset around how we show up for ourselves, or rather not show up for ourselves, and how that downstream impacts so many other things. So listeners, if you are ready to redefine leadership from the inside out, I hope you'll join the Beyond the Quo community. Connect with us on social media, share your thoughts. If there are topics you would like to talk about, I'm happy to take emails and so forth. And let's support each other on this journey to prioritize self-leadership. If Elizabeth's story spoke to you, please share this episode with someone that needs this reminder. And Elizabeth, where can they find you if they want more information?
Yeah, you can find me at elizabethsherman.com, and I also hang out in Facebook at Total Health by Eliz, and on Instagram at elizabeth.sherman.coach.
I love it. And if you are craving community, you can check me out on Instagram, or my website is staceyluces.com. And we actually, I debuted a new global community. It's called Rising Beyond Global Community. And there you will find women in midlife who are also leaders and navigating a lot of the conversations that we're going to discuss. It's a free membership. Hop in, share your voice, share your thoughts. And I look forward to connecting with you next week. Thanks so much.